Amy, I'm so delighted that we're together today. This is so great.
Wonderful.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Welcome. We have the cups again.
Yes.
I forgot them in a couple videos, but I brought them back.
Oh, good. Good. I like the Bambi.
Thank you.
Nice Bambi.
There's Bambi on this mug.
Yep.
You might not be able to see it, but it is here.
Yep.
So this week's reading, we're going through bits of Joshua, bits of Judges, and all of Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that we just talked about that really stuck out to you is the book of Judges. And we both agree, I think, that either Quentin Tarantino or Mel Gibson really should have been the ones directing this. It's very intense.
Yes.
A lot of things happen in it that are really edgy, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a taste of what happens in Judges?
Yeah.
Why it's exciting to you?
It was, as I was looking at these different books, I was of course drawn to Judges because I find Judges to be, between Joshua, Judges, and Ruth, but also in the context of the Bible, aggressively violent and upsetting to read.
Wildly.
It's hard to read Judges and be like, oh, this is a great fun, like, and I remember reading it as a child and being like, oh, look at these great heroes of the Bible, Gideon and Samson, and now reading it as an adult, recognizing how upsetting their actions are. But I was also drawn to it because I always have that question of, well, why is this in the Bible?
Yeah,
what
why
is
would
this doing
something
here?
so disturbing be in something that is we're supposed to look up to as some kind of a guide to our lives, and ultimately, like, Christ read this and like lived a beautiful, merciful life that we and compassionate and loving, all of these things, and yet, like, we read the book of Judges.
Yep. Yeah.
What's happening?
Well, and I think that there's something interesting in the way we approach books of the Bible that so often as like a guidebook or as instructions for how to live our lives. And with Judges, this changes if you go into it, the framing of it as a tragedy, like a literary tragedy. What is happening? What is the purpose of this tragedy existing here? And because the arc of Judges is a continual, it's getting worse and worse and worse as you read it. The tragedy in the beginning of it, there are still redemptive characters and redemptive moments. And as you get to the end of this, there are some of the worst stories, I think, that there can be in the Bible. It's some of the most depraved moments of violence, aggression, that I've seen. And when we understand it as a tragedy, we're suddenly recognizing what is God experiencing as his people are becoming more and more depraved. And our heart doesn't turn towards the quote unquote like heroes of the book of Judges, but recognizing how is God attempting to redeem and have grace for his people when their actions are only becoming worse.
Wow. So what I'm hearing you say is that we have so many times read these characters as heroes of the faith, and we haven't read it as this really a downward spiral and as in a literary context. I love how you're framing it as a tragedy, and then also framing the heart of God being like, oh, God is actually mortified at the descent towards this, and as even that's not in this reading plan, but that's in later in the book of Judges, just horrible things.
Even as we look at, like, Gideon's kind of one of the easy examples that I remember in Sunday school, Gideon's moments of faith as he puts the sheepskin out and whether or not and also Gideon being kind of a both emblem of faith and a challenge of faith, of like he keeps pushing God further to say, like, okay, are you really speaking to me? Which is a very relatable thing, which is another reason why we look to Gideon often. He has this relatable doubt and questioning of God. But then he has this great moment of faith. He has this incredible story arc where his 300 men win this battle in this great act of faith. And then an older, later Gideon violently murders the soldiers who didn't join him in the battle. And then he creates an idol of the gold he won that then leads people astray again. And so looking that through the angle of how is God experiencing this person who he imbued with his spirit, he led in this incredible victory of faith with God, and then he takes these actions that completely mislead his people.
Would you call that a warning, take a tale of warning, like, oh, this could happen to you? Or is there something deeper that, because I'm hearing that immediately and I think to myself, oh, I better watch out and not pull a Gideon. Do you think that's how we're supposed to read it? Or
no,
is there something better?
I think there's something better there.
Yeah.
I actually think that what we're seeing here is that God is a redemptive God. God is a God of grace. That God continually shows up for his people, even though this is the arc that keeps taking place.
Wow.
That there is this tragic story happening where I think we are being asked to be drawn into God's perspective of his love for his people, despite the actions they take, and he's continually showing up for them.
Wow.
It also paves the way for the absolute need we have as humans of Christ, the absolute need we have of redemption and salvation, regardless of who we are, regardless of like the good things we do are not going to save us. That we are absolutely in the need of salvation of a Savior, because we're all capable of hurting. And maybe not. We're not talking about the extreme situations of the Book of Judges, but sometimes it takes those extreme stories for us to come to terms with us as humans and our need for God and his willingness to go to the extremes and to love us in the extremes and to redeem us in the extremes. It's harder. It's almost like easier sometimes to imagine that God can save us when we do little things wrong. But to look at the actions being taken by the judges in this book and know that God continues to redeem his people it's a different level of grace and redemption than we often imagine and for our own lives.
You're right. It really, in that way, expands our imaginations of how God's redemption is possible. That's really powerful. What's one encouragement you have for people as they read through all of this?
I would encourage people that as they read through the Book of Judges to hold some distance over what's being said by the characters of the Bible, that when God puts his spirit in a person, as he does in Judges many times with the judges and the leaders, it is not necessarily God endorsing their behavior. It is instead him extending his grace and extending his redemption for his people as a whole, but that the flawed humanity that we see isn't indicative of who God is.
Wow.
And that feels especially important in the Book of Judges, because I've so often myself had the habit of reading the Bible and seeing, well, here's this person that I've been told to emblemize or told to honor as God's prophet, as God's judge, as God's king, who is failing and messing up in so many ways. And so to remember to hold that distance as we read it, that just because it is happening in the Bible doesn't mean that is God's endorsement of what is going on.
Wow. That's a really good word. I'm going to take that to heart. And Amy, thank you so much for joining me today. This was really fun.
Absolutely. This was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.